All right, welcome back everyone to this Academic Explainer. Today we are unpacking an absolute heavyweight of a topic. We're diving deep into TEMA 40 Notebook LM. For all the educators and language scholars tuning in, you already know the English noun phrase is basically the fundamental vehicle for encoding meaning. But why is it such a heavyweight? Well, simply put, the noun phrase carries the absolute bulk of lexical information in discourse. It is literally the primary cognitive engine for delivering content. So whether you're gearing up for those high-stakes EOI exams or you're just a syntax nerd looking to master the deep architecture of English, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to look at the precise, almost mechanical ways speakers build incredibly complex concepts from just a single head noun.
Looking at our roadmap for today, we're basically doing a left-to-right structural journey. We'll start with the anatomy of the noun phrase, move through determination and premodifiers, slide over to postmodification, and wrap up with the real-world pedagogical applications you actually need for the EOI classroom. Let's get into it.
Before we really get our hands dirty with the grammar, I want to throw this quote out there to frame our entire discussion. It's from Quirk and his colleagues' legendary 1984 Comprehensive Grammar. They describe the noun phrase as possessing indefinite potential complexity. I just absolutely love that phrase. It perfectly captures that mastering the noun phrase, it's not just some basic grammar drill. It's an exploration of an architecture that mirrors the structural depth of the entire clause itself. Honestly, it's the absolute bedrock for academic literacy.
Okay, so part one, the anatomy of the noun phrase, focusing on that central syntactic anchor. Now, depending on whose framework you're reading, you'll see a couple of different labels tossed around. Downing, leaning heavily on systemic functional linguistics, prefers the term nominal group. That highlights its functional grouping around a semantic core. On the flip side, you have scholars like Quirk and Huddleston who stick to the classic noun phrase, focusing more on its strict syntactic dependence on the head noun. But here's the thing, despite those different theoretical angles, all these frameworks agree on one fundamental reality. The whole structure is built on a hierarchical architecture. You have a central head surrounded by optional, structurally dependent elements before and after it. Think of every non-elliptical noun phrase like a blueprint. We mentally drop an anchor at the head, which is usually a noun or pronoun, and then we stack information reading left to right. We kick things off with a determiner to specify reference, then slide in some premodifiers for inherent qualities. Bam! We hit the head noun. And finally, we can tack on postmodifiers for extra, non-inherent details. This specific sequence is what allows us to meticulously build experiential, interpersonal, and textual meaning layer by grammatical layer.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the system of determination, and how nouns lock into their context.
Determination is basically a global system in English grammar. Its whole job is to force a noun phrase to relate to its situational context, usually through definite, indefinite, or zero articles. Syntactically, it is strictly ordered. Think of it kind of like a highly exclusive VIP line at a club where every word has a designated unchangeable spot. We've got three positional classes. Predeterminers are at the front of the line, handling fractions and multipliers, words like all, both, or half. Next up are central determiners. These are your standard articles, demonstratives, and possessives like the, this, or my. Finally, bringing up the rear, we have postdeterminers, giving us quantities and numbers, like many, few, or first. You literally have to stack them in this exact order, no exceptions.
Now, you can't just grab these determiners off the shelf randomly. There are incredibly strict co-occurrence restrictions governed by the head noun. For example, the predeterminer both is 100% limited to plural count nouns. I mean, you can say both my legs, right? But you can't say both my water. It just doesn't work. Half, on the other hand, offers way more semantic flexibility across different noun classes. Meanwhile, universal determiners like every and each are strictly locked to singular count nouns. Nailing down these rigid rules is absolutely essential for your high-level learners because they form the absolute basis of grammatical accuracy.
Moving on to Section 3, let's talk about premodifiers, specifically epithets and classifiers. Once we've got the determination sorted, we get to modify. Premodifiers describe the permanent, inherent qualities of an entity, and semantically, they fall into two very distinct camps. First, we have epithets. These describe subjective and objective qualities. Think of adjectival phrases like stunning or small. On the other side, we have classifiers. Now, these don't just describe, they restrict the head noun to a specific subclass. Let me give you an example. A criminal lawyer isn't a lawyer who happens to be a criminal, right? Criminal is the classifier here, permanently restricting the exact subclass of law they practice. And unlike epithets, classifiers are very often realized by nouns or particles rather than pure adjectives.
And here is where English gets fiercely demanding. It forces a rigorous four-zone sequence upon multiple premodifiers. This is a crucial stacking exercise for advanced syntax. Zone 1 is pre-central, reserved for non-gradable adjectives like absolute or certain. Zone 2 is central, for your typical gradable adjectives like tall or attractive. Slide over to Zone 3, the post-central zone, and that's where colors and participles like red or broken live. Finally, Zone 4 is pre-head. This holds the most nominal modifiers, like nationalities or materials, think Japanese or wooden.
That central zone, Zone 2, can get super crowded. So here's a massive rule of thumb for your advanced students. Within the central zone, size, length, and height normally precede other non-derived qualities. This is exactly why we naturally say a small, round table and not a round, small table. As native or highly proficient speakers, we do this entirely unconsciously. We don't even think about it. And that is exactly why it represents such a huge cognitive hurdle for learners. They have to consciously internalize this sequence to sound natural.
All right, jumping over to the right side of the head nouns, Section 4, postmodification, also known as the qualifier.
So, we are now looking at dependents that add external, temporary, or non-inherent info. The absolute tightest relationship in nominal postmodification is apposition. This is where two nominals share the exact same reference and syntactic function. How do you spot it? It passes the omission test. Take a phrase like Professor Quark. You could omit either professor or quark, and the sentence is still perfectly grammatical. Apposition can be restrictive or non-restrictive too. Think about it. My brother the doctor is here, with commas, means the doctor is just extra, non-restrictive detail. But my brother the doctor is here, without commas, that restricts the subject. It implies you have multiple brothers and you need to specify exactly which one showed up.
Zooming out from apposition, we hit the heavier, circumstantial, and attributive blocks. Prepositional phrases are by far the most frequent type of postmodification in English. They actually occur 3 to 4 times more often than clausal alternatives. Think of phrases like the roads of China. We also heavily use relative clauses, both restrictive and non-restrictive, along with non-finite clauses using ing and ed forms. Those non-finite clauses, they are highly preferred in formal academic registers because they let writers pack in incredibly dense information without all the syntactic baggage of a full relative clause, which actually perfectly previews our next topic.
And finally, Section 5, context and pedagogical implications. Basically, the so what of all this high-level theory.
Scholars like Douglas Biber and Michael Holliday have shown time and again how incredibly sensitive the noun phrase is to register. It literally adapts its structural weight depending on the communicative demand. In academic writing, you see massive information density achieved through nominalization and complex premodification. But then you look at journalistic writing and it heavily compresses noun phrases in headlines just to save space, like stock market crash fears. Literary styles exploit the full, beautiful range of modifiers for aesthetic and rhythmic effects. In conversational English, it relies on much simpler noun phrases, heavily leaning on shared context and dictic expressions, like just saying, that guy over there.
If you're teaching B2 to C2 candidates in an EOI setting, this is where the rubber meets the road. Your instructional interventions have to target these specific friction points. First, mastering the article system is notoriously frustrating, especially if your learner's L1 lacks articles entirely. We all know the pain of repeatedly correcting article drop in advanced essays. Plus, getting students to internalize that rigid, four-zone ordering of adjectives takes immense practice. And finally, distinguishing between restrictive and non-restrictive relative clauses is absolutely vital for reading comprehension and writing precision at the C2 level.
I want to circle back to a massive reoccurring motif here, a concept that magically turns dry syntax rules into a powerful tool for elevating student literacy. It's called conceptual packaging. The noun phrase allows speakers to construe reality in completely different ways to manage information density. Think about the cognitive difference between saying the destruction of the city, which is a highly nominalized, neatly packaged concept, versus the city being destroyed, which feels much more like an active, unfolding process. By turning a verb process into a nominalized thing, you create an abstract entity that can now be debated, measured, and analyzed. That cognitive shift is the very cornerstone of advanced academic writing. Teaching your students how to manipulate this packaging is the real key to true fluency.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on Tema 40 Notebook LM, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. How does mastering conceptual packaging change the reality of the texts you analyze and teach? When your students truly grasp the indefinite potential complexity of the English noun phrase, they aren't just memorizing grammar rules, they are learning how to actively shape and manage reality through language. Keep that in mind as you prep your next advanced lesson. Thanks for hanging out with me for this analysis, and keep exploring.